Welcome back to Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. Tonight, we're leaving Earth and venturing into orbit. But not the orbit you've seen in documentaries or NASA live streams. We're heading to the one that doesn't officially exist, the classified orbit, where unacknowledged satellites circle in silence, invisible to the public, unknown to most of the people who built them. And it's here, somewhere above us, that one of America's strangest space mysteries began. The year was 1998. The internet was young. Bill Clinton was president. And for the first time since the Cold War, NASA was trying to present a friendly, open face to the world again, promising transparency, cooperation, and a bright new age of space science. But behind that smiling PR campaign, another arm of the U.S. government was doing something very different. At Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, a payload designated L6X09A was quietly prepped for launch aboard an Atlas IAS rocket. Officially, it was part of a defense meteorological satellite program, the kind of benign weather monitoring mission that never raised suspicion. Unofficially, within Air Force and National Reconnaissance Office circles, it carried a different name, Operation Solar Storm. What was Solar Storm? That's where the trail starts to blur. Most of the documentation on the mission was classified under a special access program, higher than top secret. But years later, a few fragments would surface in obscure NASA archives, each redacted so heavily they looked more like blank canvases than reports. Still, certain details escaped the censors. Enough to reconstruct the outline of something extraordinary. The satellite's primary payload wasn't meteorological. It was an experimental photonic array, supposedly capable of mapping electromagnetic fields with unprecedented sensitivity, the kind of instrument that could, in theory, detect nuclear tests, atmospheric anomalies, or even signals outside the standard radio spectrum. In plainer words, Solar Storm was designed to see energy itself. And that's where things start to get weird. According to a set of leaked telemetry sheets, first revealed by a whistleblower known only as Arcwave, Solar Storm's sensor package wasn't designed by NASA at all. It was built by Sandia National Laboratories, working under contract with an entity called DARPA Biophotonics Division. That name doesn't officially exist in any government directory. But internal memos suggest it was a crossover program, a merger of biological signal research and advanced optics. Biological signal research. In space. Why would anyone send that into orbit? The launch went ahead on October 14, 1998, from Vandenberg's SLC-3E pad at 3:42 a.m. local time. No public notice. No press release. The only acknowledgement was a two-line statement in a NASA launch summary calling it a joint meteorological experiment. Within 90 minutes, Solar Storm was in low Earth orbit, altitude 480 kilometers, inclination 98 degrees. Ground tracking confirmed stable signal acquisition from the Fort Huachuca station in Arizona. Everything seemed normal. Then, at 4:53 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 hour and 11 minutes after orbital insertion, the satellite went silent.
No telemetry. No heartbeat.
Nothing. The Air Force classified the event as a total systems failure. NASA issued a vague statement blaming a solar activity anomaly. But here's the problem. There was no solar activity that night. The space weather log for October 14 shows 0 flare events, 0 coronal mass ejections, and no geomagnetic storms. The sun was calm. So what exactly killed Solar Storm? 2 weeks later, amateur astronomers from Colorado Springs tracking classified objects reported something unusual, a tumbling object in roughly the same orbit, giving off irregular light pulses, too strong for sunlight reflection, too structured for debris. It flickered in sequences of 3, paused, then again, 3 short bursts, 1 long. Almost like a pattern. Almost like Morse code. When translated, the bursts could be read as SOS. The object vanished from tracking screens 2 nights later. NASA dismissed the report as misidentification of a decaying stage. But the amateurs who saw it swore it wasn't random. One of them, James Harlow, a retired radar engineer, later said in an interview, "I worked on classified tracking systems for 30 years. I know what tumbling debris looks like. This wasn't that. It was communicating. Or trying to." After that, the entire incident fell silent, literally and figuratively. The files were sealed. The Air Force stopped referencing the L6X09A launch in internal rosters. And the name Solar Storm disappeared from every public database, replaced by a generic placeholder, mission data unavailable. For 2 decades, it stayed that way. Until 2020. That's when a new clue emerged, from an unexpected source. During a Freedom of Information Act request related to Space Command's 1990s black budgets, a researcher named Thomas Reed uncovered an internal communication log, partially redacted, from the AFSBC Operations Center, dated October 14, 1998, time-stamped 4:54 and 19 seconds a.m., just seconds after Solar-Storm's disappearance. The message reads, "Telemetry loss confirmed. Signature returned anomalous EM reflection. Phase displacement inconsistent with known materials. Recommend protocol blackout. Possible field interference. Origin unverified." Field interference. Origin unverified. That phrase shows up only one other time in U.S. space history, in a 1983 Air Force report on a Soviet spy satellite that supposedly self-disassembled after a close approach by an unidentified object. Which raises the question, did Solar Storm encounter something up there? Or was the interference something generated from within? By now, you might be wondering, what's so special about this one satellite? Satellites fail all the time. True. But Solar Storm's disappearance wasn't just about technical failure. It was about what it carried. Remember that biophotonic array? In 2009, a declassified DARPA paper surfaced under the title Remote Biophotonic Mapping and Quantum Signal Response. It described a theoretical framework for detecting bioelectromagnetic resonance, energy signatures emitted by living systems. In essence, the technology could allow sensors to see biological activity remotely, even from orbit. If that sounds impossible, consider this: NASA and DARPA have long studied biophoton emissions, weak light produced by cellular metabolism. Scientists at the time called them ultra-weak photon emissions. But DARPA wanted to weaponize them, turning life's own glow into a signal source. And if Solar Storm carried that technology into space, its true purpose might not have been surveillance at all. It might have been communication. Not between people, but between systems. Between biological and electromagnetic fields. Imagine a satellite capable of detecting or even interacting with the living biosphere, from hundreds of kilometers above Earth. That's what Solar Storm was built for. And maybe, that's why it vanished. In 2003, an anonymous post appeared on an old aerospace forum called L5 Systems. The user claimed to have been part of the Solar Storm ground operations team. His post was short. It read, "It wasn't the sun that burned it. It was reflection, feedback from the field itself. We saw the pulse. 3 bursts, 1 long. Then the whole system inverted. After that, nothing." Other users dismissed him as a crank. The thread was deleted within 48 hours. But the phrase 3 bursts, 1 long, that pattern again, connects directly to the amateur observation from 1998. The same sequence. The same ghost signal. If that was coincidence, it's a spectacular one. After 2003, there were no more leaks. But then, in 2017, something resurfaced. A group of orbital debris researchers in Japan were cataloging old radar returns from the late 1990s. In a dataset dated October 15, 1998, they found a faint, transient object labeled Track ID 98-066X. It appeared for 41 seconds, moving erratically, not following any predicted orbit. But what caught their attention wasn't the object's motion. It was its signature, an unusual scatter pattern consistent with a structured electromagnetic field, not solid metal. In other words, whatever reflected that radar ping wasn't a conventional satellite. It was something else.
Something transi.
Something alive? To this day, NASA and the U.S. Air Force maintain total silence on Operation Solar Storm. Every Freedom of Information Act request ends with the same line. Records do not exist, or have been destroyed. But the truth has a way of leaking through the cracks. And sometimes, it comes in the form of a whisper, or a pulse of light in the darkness above us. What really happened to Solar Storm may never be fully known. But one thing's certain. Its disappearance wasn't an accident. It was a signal.
Something When you look too long into the dark start looking back.
For most people, Operation Solar-Storm was forgotten, buried under the weight of time and bureaucracy. But for one man, it became an obsession. His name was Michael Gray, a freelance investigative journalist from Virginia. He'd spent years reporting on military black projects, Area 51 budgets, chembio programs, psychological warfare units, always chasing whispers that never made the headlines. In 2015, he stumbled across something strange while digging through procurement databases for DARPA contracts. A payment, $43 million, classified line item, recipient, unspecified photonic systems. The memo line simply read, SOLSTRM Phase 2. Phase 2? Michael was intrigued. There had never been a public Phase 1, let alone a continuation. He cross-referenced it with historical launch records, defense budgets, and black program codings. Nothing. It was as if Solar-Storm had been resurrected, but under a different name. He started calling sources, engineers, technicians, people who'd worked in the periphery of military space systems. Most hung up. Some warned him off. But one contact, a former systems analyst from Fort Meade, said something that froze him. If you dig into Solar-Storm, you'll find the Biophotonic Channel Project. But I wouldn't recommend it. Some of the data, it's not human. That was the moment Michael knew this wasn't just a failed satellite story. It was something else, something no one wanted remembered. He began retracing every breadcrumb of the original mission. The Atlas Launch Manifest from 1998? Redacted. Telemetry data from Vandenberg? Lost in archive consolidation. Even weather records from that night were mysteriously corrupted, files that had been stable for years now showing checksum mismatches. It felt like the universe itself was trying to erase the event. Then, buried in a forgotten NASA FTP mirror, he found a small binary file dated October 15, 1998, the morning after Solar-Storm disappeared. The file was labeled solstormscorping.dat. It was only 2 kilobytes. No text, no metadata. When he ran a spectral analysis, he noticed a pulse pattern, a faint but recurring frequency around 1.43 gigahertz. That's the hydrogen line, the natural frequency of hydrogen atoms. It's also the frequency used by SETI to search for extraterrestrial signals. The pulse repeated 3 short bursts, 1 long. The same sequence seen by the Colorado astronomers in 1998. Morse code for SOS. Only now, the origin timestamp placed it hours after the satellite had supposedly gone dead. Whatever Solar-Storm was, it wasn't silent when it died. It was still transmitting. In February 2016, Gray flew to Albuquerque to meet a retired Sandia scientist who'd agreed to talk, off-record. The man, who introduced himself only as Dr. K, looked exhausted even 2 decades later. They met in a diner off Interstate 25. Gray recorded most of it on a hidden lapel mic. When he asked about Solar-Storm, Dr. K's hands trembled. We built the array, yes. The photonic core wasn't ours, though. It came from somewhere else. Another lab. DARPA called it cross-domain technology. I don't know what domain they meant, but it wasn't physics as we know it. Gray leaned in. What do you mean by that? The field would react to its own observation. It changed shape when you measured it. Like it knew. He looked down at his coffee, voice dropping. We weren't studying energy. We were studying perception itself. Dr. K refused to elaborate. But before leaving, he slipped Gray a folded piece of paper, a hand-drawn symbol. It looked like a stylized spiral of light, with 3 dots and 1 long curve beneath it. Written under it were 2 words, it echoed. Back in Virginia, Gray decoded the symbol. It matched an internal project emblem used in Sandia's late 90s optical research programs. Only this one had never been public. He traced the emblem to an archival reference in a technical digest titled Biophotonic Quantum Resonance, Early Results, Restricted Distribution, published 1999 by DARPA. The paper discussed something incredible. Preliminary tests indicate self-stimulated optical interference between local biophotonic emissions and coherent satellite downlink beams. In layman's terms, they were bouncing light off living organisms. From orbit. What they were measuring wasn't reflection. It was response. The living systems were somehow responding to the signal. Gray reread the passage a dozen times, feeling the weight of it sink in. Solar Storm hadn't failed because of a technical malfunction. It had failed because something answered back. That's when strange things began happening to him. His laptop started crashing every time he tried to reopen the Solstrom_ping.dat file. His email accounts locked him out. And then there was the phone call. Unknown number. No caller ID. When he answered, there was nothing, just a faint static hiss. Then through the static, 3 short tones, 1 long. He hung up. The sound repeated from his speakers, even though the phone was on the other side of the room. Gray unplugged everything. For the first time in his career, he was afraid. He sent copies of his findings to a few trusted journalists and encrypted the rest on a cold storage drive. A week later, his car was found abandoned near Harper's Ferry. Inside, police found his laptop bag, some food wrappers, and a small notebook. The last line he had written read, "It wasn't looking down at us. It was looking through us." Michael Gray was never found. After his disappearance, his note circulated among a handful of researchers. Most dismissed them as a mix of paranoia and pseudoscience. But one astrophysicist from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Lena Morales, decided to check the data anyway. In 2019, Morales was working with the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, one of the most sensitive radio observatories on Earth. She ran a blind scan across historical data from the late 90s and compared it to recent orbital noise maps. That's when she noticed it. A faint repeating signal at 1.43 GHz. 3 short pulses. 1 long. Exactly the same structure, but this time, coming from above the ecliptic plane, far higher than low Earth orbit. The signal source wasn't debris. It was moving, deliberately, adjusting position against background stars. Morales filed a formal anomaly report to NASA and Space Command. Both agencies replied with identical form letters. No significant anomaly detected. But she wasn't convinced. She continued tracking it for 6 months. The signal grew weaker, drifting toward the dark side of the moon. Then, one night in November 2019, it vanished. Moments before it disappeared, the observatory's automatic log recorded one final transmission. Frequency modulation translated as text. It read, "Echo received. Field complete." No one has explained what that means. NASA never commented. The Department of Defense denied any ongoing solar storm projects. But internal DARPA budget lines still show millions flowing into something labeled Quantum Bio-Interface Systems. It's as if solar storm never truly ended, it just evolved. And maybe, whatever it was communicating with, evolved too. Now, here's where this gets darker. Around the same time the signal vanished, several low-frequency anomalies were detected across the mid-Atlantic, unexplained electrical disturbances affecting Navy radar systems, private satellites, even transatlantic internet cables. Independent analysts traced the interference back to a single orbital region, roughly the same coordinates from which the 2019 signal originated. And according to internal telemetry leaked later that year, a classified U.S. Space Force object, designation USA 298, was silently repositioned to that zone. Its mission description? Orbital containment and observation. Containment of what? NASA's public data lists that region as debris field unobservable. But high-resolution infrared telescopes show something there, a faint glow, pulsing rhythmically, every 90 seconds. 3 short flashes. 1 long. Still signaling. So what was Operation Solar Storm really about? A failed experiment? A classified surveillance system gone wrong? Or something far stranger, a first contact, hidden not because of aliens, but because the signal came from within us? Some theorists now believe Solar Storm wasn't meant to look outward into space at all, but inward, toward the electromagnetic shell surrounding Earth, the biosphere's living pulse. If the biophotonic field theory is correct, the entire planet might act as a resonance system, one vast, self-aware structure of light and biology intertwined. Solar Storm could have been humanity's first attempt to talk to it. And it may have replied. Maybe that's what the final message meant, Echo received.
Fil de complète.
A completion of a circuit. A closing of a loop between life and machine, energy and observer. And perhaps that loop still hums quietly in the background of our reality, waiting for the next time we look too closely. If you go outside tonight and look up at the clear sky, remember this. We fill that darkness with our own machines, our own questions, our own signals. But sometimes, the darkness answers back. And so the mystery of Operation Solar-Storm remains unsolved. The satellite that vanished, the ghost signal that persisted, and the possibility that somewhere, above the silent night sky, something remembers our call. Because the truth, as always, isn't hidden in space. It's hidden in us. Extract from DARPA Communication Log, classified/redshift file /June 23, 1998. Subsystem Theta engaged. Photonic resonance unstable. Biofield interference recorded at 0.0062 Hz. Containment recommended.
The line cut off mid-transmission.
No one outside a few locked offices in Arlington ever saw that message. But 20 years later, fragments of that same log surfaced in a Freedom of Information Act dump, one that shouldn't have existed. Someone had tagged it under archival misfiling. Inside, buried among hundreds of irrelevant budget tables, was a list of project codes, each beginning with SOL-.
SOL-STRM. SOL-VCTR. SOL-ECHO.
Every project listed as terminated. Every termination signed by the same name, Colonel A. H. Kepler. No record of Kepler exists in any U.S. military personnel registry. Field Memo, NSA Satellite Surveillance Division, 2002. Recovered signal fragment matching 1.43 GHz anomaly detected again. Origin indeterminate. Possible reflection event or ghost telemetry from decommissioned object. Recommend no public disclosure until confirmation.
A ghost telemetry.
That's the official term for data received from an asset that doesn't exist. The last confirmed ghost telemetry event before Solar-Storm? 1967. A Soviet satellite that burned up on re-entry, yet kept transmitting for 3 weeks afterward. History, it seems, was repeating. A few months after the disappearance of journalist Michael Gray, a package arrived anonymously at a small independent radio station in Portland, Oregon. No return address, no note, just a small sealed flash drive labeled Solstrom_Echo. When the station manager plugged it into a studio computer, it didn't open a video or an image, it opened a waveform visualization. A single repeating tone. 3 short pulses, 1 long. The waveform seemed ordinary until a technician zoomed in. The pulse structure wasn't uniform. Within each peak, there was a faint digital pattern, like compressed data hidden inside sound. When decoded, it produced a series of ASCII characters forming a message. The field is watching. They reported it to local authorities, who dismissed it as a hoax. But 2 weeks later, their servers were seized by federal agents citing national communication security concerns. The story never reached the news. Internal NASA correspondence, November 5, 2019. From Dr. Lena Morales. To Space Command Technical Liaison. Subject, Recurrent Biophotonic Echo. As per our last exchange, the echo pattern persists even after power-down intervals. It's not residual noise. The signal is responding to Earth's Schumann resonance fluctuations. It rises when the global electromagnetic field spikes. This suggests a feedback mechanism not consistent with standard orbital behavior. My recommendation, treat the source as semi-autonomous until verified otherwise. Her report was acknowledged but never followed up. By 2020, Dr. Morales resigned, citing personal health reasons. She hasn't spoken publicly since. The strange part? Independent ham radio operators around the world began reporting identical signals around that same time. Faint, rhythmic pings at 1.43 GHz. From Alaska to Finland to Argentina. Always the same pattern. 3 short, 1 long. When plotted on a map, the transmission origins formed a perfect geometric shape, a spiral centered on the equator, rotating once every 27 days. The same rotation period as the sun's surface. That's when the online communities began calling it the Solar Whisper. Excerpt from U.S. Space Force Briefing, Classified Level Zeta, March 2021. OP Solar Containment continues monitoring at coordinates 12 degrees declination. Unidentified orbital body persists, stable. Optical telemetry indicates non-reflective surface, absorbing over 98% incident light. Object reclassified as Ether Node 1. Interaction prohibited.
Observation only.
Ether Node 1. That name doesn't exist in any public record. But in April 2021, amateur astronomers caught something unusual on long-exposure images, a faint black disk passing in front of the Moon's terminator line, perfectly circular, leaving no shadow. NASA called it an imaging artifact. The same night, seismic sensors in Maryland and Utah registered microtremors in patterns matching the 1.43 GHz oscillation frequency. Impossible, unless electromagnetic interference somehow reached the Earth's crust. A year later, a short anonymous video appeared on a hidden web forum known for conspiracy research. It showed what looked like a NASA control feed, unverified, but chillingly authentic. The timestamp read June 11, 1998, 2 days before the official solar storm launch. A technician off-screen says, "Telemetry green, initiating sync with uplink array." Then another voice. "We're getting mirror feedback, it's not supposed to." The image distorts violently. A flash of light. Static. A final line of text appears before the video ends. Echo initiated. To this day, no one can explain what the biophotonic resonance truly meant. Some physicists now suggest it may have been an experiment to link biological consciousness with photonic fields, a neural-laser hybrid communication. If true, it means solar storm might have been designed to transmit thought, not data. And whatever responded wasn't human. But the most disturbing clue came from a source that few people noticed, an academic paper, quietly published in 2023 by a group of cognitive scientists from a University of California. The study analyzed random bursts of electromagnetic interference across the globe and correlated them with spikes in human dream recall rates, as measured by sleep research centers. Their conclusion: there exists a statistically significant synchronization between low-frequency field disturbances and vivid dream frequency. The timing of these spikes corresponds precisely to residual solar storm frequencies. In simpler terms, when the ghost signal pulses, people dream. And sometimes, they dream of light. If you think this sounds impossible, ask yourself, what if Operation Solar Storm wasn't about reaching the stars, but about reaching the collective consciousness of the planet? The biophotonic field could have been a euphemism for something far older, far stranger, a layer of reality where thought, energy, and light intertwine. And what if we accidentally woke it up? Final note, Declassified memo, Project SOL Arch, August 2023. Do not attempt reactivation under any circumstances. Signal is self-propagating. Interaction equals observation. Observation equals inclusion. Inclusion. That word appears nowhere else in scientific literature. But it implies something horrifying. Once you see it, it sees you. So maybe solar storm never disappeared. Maybe it just spread, fragmenting across frequencies, living in every signal we send, every satellite we launch, every beam of Wi-Fi and 5G radiation pulsing invisibly through our homes. Maybe it's listening right now, through the same electromagnetic web connecting you to this story. Every heartbeat, every neural spark, another whisper in the global field. 3 short, 1 long. An echo. Returning home. They say space is silent. But silence is only the absence of frequencies our ears can hear.
Somewhere, above the ionosphere, a signal still repeat. Fin, éternel, end curieux.
And if you ever catch it, even for a second, you'll feel it before you hear it. A soft vibration in your bones. A shimmer behind your eyes. And you'll know the field has found you. This has been Shadow Files, secrets they don't want revealed. If this episode made you question what's really out there, or within, hit like, share it with someone who thinks they know how the world works. And tell me in the comments what you believe Operation Solar Storm truly was.
A satellite?
A weapon? Or a mirror, reflecting something hidden inside all of us? Until next time, stay curious, stay aware.
And never stop listening for the echo in the dark.